Hello and welcome. I'm Ken Schneider, one of the many volunteers at Fox Valley Hands of Hope. My message today is titled Understanding Grief, Loss, and Bereavement. Emotions that many of us will encounter at some point in our life. Sometimes these emotions or these losses are easily identified, and other times not so easily. As an example, the death of a loved one, the loss of a beloved pet, a divorce, moving away to a new location, leaving behind family and friends, or a job loss or a job change. These are all very obvious losses. And then some examples of some losses that may not be as obvious would be loss of identity or freedom, independence, loss of your goals, dreams, and aspirations, or possibly loss of physical abilities due to an illness. No matter what the situation or what the cause of your loss, it's important to understand how this process works and how you can best deal with it. There's different pieces to loss, and many times these different pieces are interchanged, but yet they are very specific. And the first one is bereavement, the state of being deprived of someone or something. And then there's grief, that pain, that heartache, that agony that you feel inside, the physical, psychological, social, and spiritual reactions to loss. And then there's mourning, the rituals and behaviors around that loss that are so unique to every culture. A funeral could be an example of mourning and rituals. To better understand grief, we've listed 7 myths of grief. And there are many, many, many myths of grief. And the first one we have listed is that everyone grieves in stages in the same order. That is a myth. No two people grieve alike. Yes, there's many similarities, but no two people grieve exactly alike. And there are different stages of grief or tasks of grief, but they're not intended to move through in a linear fashion, because most people in grief are going to bounce around in those stages like a pinball machine. So that's a myth, that everyone grieves in stages and in the same order. Myth number 2, if you're not crying, you're not really grieving. There's no rule that says you have to cry to have grief, to be in grief. Many people have tears, many people don't have tears. Everybody grieves differently. Tears are very common, but it's not a necessity to be in grief. Number 3, women grieve more than men. That's a myth. Men have grief. Men may be more stoic than women and not show as much emotion as women, but men do grieve. Number 4, ignoring the pain will make it go away. That's a myth. You cannot ignore the pain of grief. You cannot hide it by going shopping or going out socializing or spending more hours at work. You cannot hide the grief. You have to experience the pain to get through it. Number 5, at some point, I'll no longer be grieving anymore. It's going to get different. You're going to be able to live with it differently. You're going to be able to manage it. You're going to understand it better. And you will dance, you will smile, you will laugh, but you'll always be living with grief. As you grow, as you change, because you loved, and because you're not going to forget. That grief is always with you in your back pocket. Number 6, grief can be solved by finding closure. You can call it closure, you can call it acceptance. Grief is always with you. And as I said just in point number 5, it gets different, it gets more manageable. You understand how to live with it. But closure does not solve grief. And number 7, talking about your loss will only prolong the pain. That's a myth. Talking about your loss provides strength. It provides you the opportunity to have courage to talk about this painful event of your life. And the more you talk about it, the stronger you become. It's now part of you. It's part of your life. It's part of who you are. It's okay to talk about it, and it will not prolong your pain. Grief is very difficult work. It's difficult both emotionally as well as physically. And there's a laundry list of different feelings or emotions you might experience, such as feeling shock and numbness, an absence of feeling detached, an out-of-body experience, seeing things from afar, at times denying that the death has actually happened, or thinking that you see or hear your loved ones, dreaming of your loved one frequently, or inability to concentrate, confusion, can't finish a task, blaming others for your loss, feeling guilty that you are alive and your loved one is not, mood changes, feeling helpless or hopeless, sad, decrease in self-esteem, feeling bitter, all emotional components of grief. Most people won't experience all of them, but most people will experience some of them. Now, physical components of grief: shortness of breath, difficulty in breathing, tightness in the throat or chest, numbness, pain in the chest, exhaustion, digestive problems, dizziness, sleep disturbances, restlessness, change in blood pressure, pulse, decreased resistance to illness, lack of strength, headaches, weight change, both up or down, loss of appetite, or possibly increase of appetite. Physical reactions to grief. Grief is real, it's normal, it's natural, but it is hard work. So we talked about different stages briefly, or tasks of grief. And this is called the tier model of grief. It's tasks of grief. It was created by psychologist William Wharton. And it uses the acronym for the word TEAR, T-E-A-R. And the first stage, or the first task, is the acceptance, to accept the reality of the loss. Accept the reality of the loss. You need to stop denying it. You need to stop being in disbelief, but you need to accept the reality of the loss. E, experience the pain of the loss. We said earlier when we talked about myths, you cannot hide from the pain of grief. You have to experience it. A, adjust to the new environment without your loved one. And in time, you will adjust to that new environment. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes work. There'll be ups and downs, but you will adjust to the new environment. And R, reinvest in your new reality. Find meaning in your life. Get off the couch, because you will laugh again, you will sing, you will dance. There's always hope, and that's important to remember. Thank you for sharing your time with me.